So I just want to talk very briefly about the co-benefits of all the climate action that the local authorities are doing, and obviously the knock-on effects for good air quality. As Pat was indicating there, the role of the CAROs is to basically build on the experience and expertise that's in the local authority sector, drive the climate action, build capacity within the sector, and coordinate and engage across the various different agencies and government departments. I suppose in some ways translate the sectoral wishes of the department down to local authority level, and then pass those back up as well to let the departments know the challenges and the issues that local authorities are having and trying to implement this. So our work programme is management and governance and coordinating the work of the local authorities through the City and County Managers Association, and then looking at issues of adaptation, mitigation, communication and citizen engagement, training and education of stakeholders, but mostly local authority staff, and then in terms of knowledge development. And a lot of that is involved in engaging with third level institutions and researchers and lots of different projects across the country. As standard, I always point this out, we're always throwing around the terms adaptation and mitigation, just being very clear on the language we're using. Climate mitigation is about what we're putting out into the environment, the impact that we're having on the planet. And climate adaptation is, even if we were to stop emitting carbon tomorrow, the changes that are going to come, and I'm going to go through some of those shortly. And mostly I suppose we think about mitigation in terms of if we cut back on the carbon, we cut back on the emissions, the air quality improves. But also the actions that we take in terms of climate adaptation, they can have a different impact and influence as well on the air quality that we're going to experience. So just to have a look at how things are going to change here in Kilkenny over the next couple of years. And if you haven't had a look at it, the Climate Ireland website is an excellent resource to try and look into the future and see how things will change and what we'll have to deal with. So all these timeframes between 2041 to 2060, we're going to be getting increases in heat waves. So we could be experiencing 5 heat waves each summer here in Kilkenny. In terms of dry periods, more than 5 days of less than 1 millimetre. And of course, the drier it is, the more aerosols are going to be mobilised in the environment and things like that, and it will impact on the air quality as well as water quality. In terms of the growing season, it's going to start 18 days earlier, and it's going to be 37 days longer. So cattle can be out on the land for much longer. What's that going to do to influence the ammonia emissions that we were just talking about and things like that in the future? What increased use of fertiliser to keep the grass growing to feed that stock? What's that going to do to influence the air quality that we have here? And in terms of very wet periods then, an increase of 52% here in Kilkenny. So it varies across the areas. Obviously we're slightly upland, so it's going to be a much more intensive rainfall that we're going to be experiencing. In terms of wind energy, the winds are actually going to slow down a bit, so the wind potential is going to slow down by -4%, and in terms of wind speeds as well, they're going to fall. Does that have a knock-on in terms of the amount of inversion layers that you're going to experience, and what influence is that going to have on air quality, again, in terms of the dispersion that we rely on, if it's not going to be there as much as we thought? And in terms of modelling and licensing, obviously the increases that you could have in inversion layers, that could really impact on the licensed emissions and stack heights and things like that we presume are correct in our licenses and permits that we have out there. Do those have to be altered a bit? So in terms of the context that we're operating in, obviously we have the Climate and Low Carbon Development Act of 2015, the National Adaptation Framework, the climate action plans that have come out, and all the way up to 2023. I suppose the big change was the Amendment Act that came out in 2021, which basically set out the duties on the local authorities to draft climate action plans. And it's not just about the emissions. So in a word, national climate objective to reduce the extent of further global warming, pursue and achieve by no later than the end of the year 2050, the transition to a climate resilient, biodiversity rich, environmentally sustainable and climate neutral economy. It's not just about the emissions, it's about all those other things as well. So in solving the problem of climate change, can we improve the lot of all these other factors as well? So in terms of the climate action plans, the local authorities have basically adopted an approach that we're familiar with in terms of things like county development plans, and we've adopted a place-based approach on climate action. What's happening in our county? What various different factors do we have to put in place to improve the well-being of the people that are living in that county? Adopting an evidence-based and integrated climate action approach. Why are we doing what we're doing? What evidence bases do we have? And I suppose that's been one of the challenges in terms of coming up with the baseline for each of the climate action plans. What data set are you using, and does that actually tie in and marry with the national data sets? But regardless, we have to pick a yardstick to measure where we are now to see where we're going to be in 5 years' time and if things have improved or not. And translating and providing strategic direction, so getting that national policy down to the local level. You have to remember, local authorities, they're involved in everything from playgrounds to graveyards and everything in between. There's a myriad of services that are there. They're all going to be impacted in terms of how we deliver those services, in terms of adaptation, and in terms of reducing our carbon footprint, the way that we do those. So the lens that we've kind of adopted in the climate action plans and the guidance and the training that we've provided is looking at the actions that we take in different ways. So first of all, in terms of full accountability, what are the things that we are directly responsible for? So some examples like our fleet management, the energy efficiency of our buildings, the energy efficiency of our public lighting, how we manage our land banks in terms of parks and recreation facilities, how often are we cutting the grass? You know, the growing season, as I said, is going to extend. You might have been doing 4 cuts a year on playgrounds or playing fields. Will that now be 5 times a year? Where's that extra diesel going to come from? Where's the budget for that? What does that mean in terms of emissions? Can we let grass grow longer? What are the health and safety implications of that versus leaving the grass longer for biodiversity? And of course, our housing stock is a big issue because we have an awful lot of social housing, and some of it is quite old and very energy inefficient. So there's a huge retrofit has to be done. And then in terms of the wider influence that local authorities have, in terms of percentage, the actual carbon footprint that local authorities have in the national context is very small, but in terms of the influence that we have on wider society, it's very, very big. So in terms of the influence that we can have, how we procure the services that we procure, are we putting green practices in place? In terms of the decision-making on planning and our county development plans and how we decide what are not appropriate developments and how this should be done. And in terms then of coordinating, facilitating public participation networks, being involved in green schools and other issues like that. And of course, advocating, publicising when projects go well, what can be done. I suppose it's a powerful message as well if you've got developers that are coming into the local authority for a meeting with planners. Are we letting our grass grow long? Do we have solar panels on the roof? Are the staff walking around and have reusable cups? All these little things, they send a message and we can set an example as to how we're working. So in terms of some of those things, charging points, you know, the local authorities will have a big influence in that in terms of where these things are going to be installed, the road opening licences, the public lighting that can potentially be adapted to provide charging points and things like that. Supporting community initiatives, like in the Midlands are some re-wetting projects, again in terms of the planning aspects of solar farms and wind farms and things like that. Caro and DEC are very much involved in the GA Green Clubs programme, which has been very, very successful. And there are other sporting organisations that are looking to adopt that as well. And in terms of things like providing greenways and that. How many of those people are actually commuting to work on that greenway? Probably not a lot, but an awful lot of people get the confidence to get back up on a bike because they've started using a greenway. So in terms of the timeframes that we're working against, obviously we're very well aware of our 51% by 2030 and net zero by 2050. But the ministerial request for the local authorities to draft their climate action plans was issued in February this year, around the 24th. We're currently at the draft stage where nearly all the local authorities have their draft plans out for consultation. And all of them have to be adopted by the local authorities by the 23rd of February 2024, and then implemented over a 5-year period up to the middle of 2029. So in terms of the training that we've had with local authority staff, we've been involved in training sessions, but also stakeholder engagement sessions as well, where we've invited all the key stakeholders in different themes: air quality, water quality, heritage, biodiversity. Got everybody in the room on the one day with local authority staff and thrashed out what are the potential actions that local authorities can actually include in their plans. And one of the key consensus that came away, you can't tackle climate action without tackling air quality. They're two sides of the same coin. The crossover in challenges is huge. The co-benefits of the solutions are huge as well. So in terms of some of the things we have to do, you know, we talked about, there was talk about inversion layers earlier. We'd get plenty of inversion layers in Cork. That's a picture of Knocknaheeny that was taken in 2021, and you can see it's a lower income area with a lot of solid fuel being burned. You can see, you don't need to test the air quality, you can see it with your eyes there. There's lots of retrofitting being done in terms of injecting walls. If it's older housing stock that are using things like cavity block, external cladding is being put in, heat pumps are being installed, and as part of that, chimneys are being decommissioned as well. So to make sure that things are nice and airtight. In terms of one of the good initiatives that was put in place by Cork City Council was a one-stop shop in terms of energy efficiency. So people could go in here and SAI, working with SAI to see what grants and what work you can do on your house, and trying to get all the forms and everything sorted in one place and one time. In terms of district heating, the incinerator in Dublin, the projects there, once that phase 3 of that project is complete, it will take 16,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide that would otherwise have been spent on domestic heating out of the system. One of the photographs there as well is of Amazon Web Services. They're taking 1,500 tonnes out of circulation as well by supplying heat to South Dublin's library, County Hall, and 63 apartments, I believe, and also some heat to the Technical University of Dublin. The GSI have also done quite a bit of work on geothermal potential as well, that could be harnessed across the country as well. So there's the very significant potential for geothermal as well. In terms of planning policy, well, if you drive around any new housing estate, you won't see any chimneys. And just like those chimneys that are being decommissioned and houses that are being retrofit, the planning now will specify you have to have a very energy efficient house that won't have a chimney. In terms of apartment blocks and things like that, once they're above a certain size in terms of parking spaces, they have to have EV charging points. Things like bike shelters and that are being encouraged. Bike bunkers as well. Now, there's always contradictions. In Dublin, there was enforcement action taken against a number of households that put in bike bunkers in front of Georgian houses, whereas this one is put in front of a Dublin local authority office and was deemed as a temporary project of limited scale and didn't require planning. So, but we have to get there. In terms of modal shift then and active travel, we have to encourage, as I said, that first mile and that last mile that we can try and walk and use the public services as much as possible, and encourage things like TFI bikes across the cities. In terms of EV charging points, again, local authorities have lots of available space in terms of car parks, public libraries, public buildings. There's lots of opportunities to provide EV charging points, and we're engaging with ZEVI, Zero Emission Vehicles Ireland, on what they would like to see rolled out. In some ways, there are lots of companies trying to snap up locations to put in charging points, but some of them are only thinking about the present, they're not thinking about the future. So we have to be careful that we don't sign over these very good locations to companies that are just going to try and make a profit in the short term. In terms of fleet management, it's horses for courses. Cork City Council, they've got a number of electrical vehicles in place, and that suits their purpose very, very well. Cork County Council, I used to work in the water quality lab. Sometimes you could be on a 5-hour round trip to take a water sample all the way in West Cork. And heavy goods vehicles as well, trying to electrify those, it's not really feasible at the moment. And of course, things like emergency vehicles, they have to remain very, very reliable. Can we have electric fire engines? I'm not sure if we're there yet. In terms of public engagement, obviously the local authorities are very much involved in the Green Schools programme, and one of the great things that's been done is the No Idling Toolkit for Schools that has been very popular. Obviously, it was mentioned earlier as well about Cork City Council's initiative on the Clean Air Cities as well. Decarbonising zones. In each local authority climate action plan, there's a designated decarbonising zone, and that's meant to be an area where we will trial all these initiatives. So, for example, in County Cork, it's the town of Macroom, and there's going to be a lot of effort put in to try and coordinate all the decarbonising and climate adaptation measures in that town and try and learn lessons. In County Clare, it's the Loophead Peninsula, which is very, very rural. There's way more cows than there are people. So these decarbonisation zones and plans will be very, very different for different counties, but there'll be lots of lessons learned as to which is the right way forward. So as I said, most of the local authorities have their plans out at the moment. Many still open for public consultation, so if you want to have a look and comment, please do. And as I said, in terms of the timeline, we're in that period at the moment where the 6-week consultation period is open for most of them. But the deadline that we have is 24th of February 2024. It's where we have to get to. Thank you very much.